The Holy Spirit, the silence of God. I dedicate this book to Vero, Monica, and Miriam, nurses on the 4th floor of the San Juan Clinical Hospital in Alicante. The mystery of the Holy Spirit. What does the third person of the Trinity mean in the Christian tradition? The mystery of the Holy Spirit. Within the Christian tradition, the Holy Spirit represents one of the deepest and most difficult realities to express in words. Theology defines it as the third person of the Trinity, alongside the Father and the Son. But this affirmation, repeated for centuries by the Church, contains a mystery that transcends mere intellectual understanding. The Holy Spirit is not an impersonal force or an abstract energy, but a living presence of God that acts silently in the heart of humankind and in history. From the earliest centuries of Christianity, thinkers and theologians attempted to explain how one God can exist in three distinct persons. The Father appears as the creator of the universe, the Son, manifested in Jesus Christ, as the Redeemer of humanity, and the Holy Spirit as the invisible breath that animates, inspires, strengthens, and sanctifies. Although different in their manifestation, the three persons share in the same divine nature. This concept, known as the Trinitarian mystery, was formulated slowly through councils, debates, and philosophical reflections that spanned centuries of Christian history. The Holy Spirit appears in the Bible frequently associated with wind, fire, and breath. In the book of Genesis, the Spirit of God moved over the waters before the creation of the world. In the Gospels, it descends upon Jesus during his baptism in the form of a dove, and in the event of Pentecost, narrated in the Acts of the Apostles, it manifests as tongues of fire that fill the disciples with courage. These images attempt to express something invisible yet powerful, the interaction of God in human life. Unlike other more concrete representations of God, the Holy Spirit is associated with silence, inner inspiration, and the secret transformation of the soul. Many Christian mystics describe the Holy Spirit's presence not as a spectacular vision, but as a profound peace, an unexpected clarity, or a serene strength capable of sustaining humanity in the midst of suffering. For this reason, some authors speak of the Holy Spirit as the discreet presence of God, one that does not impose itself violently, but silently accompanies the human conscience. In the Christian tradition, the Holy Spirit is also considered a source of wisdom, love, and unity. According to church doctrine, the Holy Spirit inspires prophets, strengthens believers, and keeps the Christian community alive throughout time. Saint Augustine even described the Holy Spirit as the bond of love between the Father and the Son, a definition that profoundly influenced Western spirituality. However, despite centuries of theological reflection, the Holy Spirit remains, for many believers, the most mysterious aspect of the Christian faith, perhaps precisely because its action is not usually manifested in the visible world, but rather within the human being, in conscience, in compassion, in the search for truth, and in the yearning for transcendence. Amidst the noise of the modern world, some believers continue to identify the Holy Spirit with that silent voice that invites hope, reconciliation, and openness to eternity. The Spirit is a silent presence. God does not always speak with words. Often, he acts within. His presence does not erupt like a sound, but as a discrete form of illumination that does not negate human freedom, but awakens it. It does not impose itself, but rather insinuates itself. The Spirit does not occupy the space of noise, but rather that of meaning. Where thought quiets and the person ceases to be scattered, a deeper action begins to be perceived, difficult to name, but recognizable in its effects. Inner clarity, peace, direction, and a certain unity of being. Therefore, more than an external voice, the Spirit can be understood as a silent presence that orders from within. It does not eliminate questions, but places them within a broader horizon. It does not replace human thought, but accompanies it, purifies it, and elevates it. In this sense, silence is not absence, but a condition for listening, and perhaps it is in that silence that human beings learn, not so much to hear words, as to recognize a presence that does not need to speak to be real. The human experience of God's silence, moments of doubt, anguish, or spiritual searching throughout history. Human beings have experienced on numerous occasions the feeling that God is silent, especially in moments of suffering, uncertainty, or inner pain. Many people wonder why God does not speak. God responds visibly to their pleas. Divine silence then appears as a profound experience that affects not only the intellect, but also the heart and hope. Doubt is part of this human experience. Even believers go through periods of spiritual darkness, disorientation, or a lack of comfort. Faith does not automatically eliminate anguish or inner questions. Rather, it often coexists with them. God's silence can thus become a test that compels human beings to delve deeper into themselves and seek meaning beyond immediate answers. In moments of anguish, we also discover our own fragility. Illness, the loss of loved ones, loneliness, or fear of the future awaken fundamental questions about the meaning of life and human destiny. In these circumstances, God's silence may seem incomprehensible. However, it is precisely in the midst of this darkness that many spiritual traditions have affirmed that a more mature faith is born, less reliant on fleeting emotions and more deeply rooted in inner perseverance. The spiritual quest often arises from this very experience. Human beings are not content with merely the material or immediate, but rather feel a desire for transcendence, for truth, and for fulfillment. Although they don't always find clear answers, they continue searching. Silence does not necessarily mean absence. Sometimes it can be a different form of presence, deeper and less obvious. Numerous thinkers and mystics have interpreted God's silence as a space for inner purification. Instead of imposing himself through spectacular signs, God allows humanity to advance freely, maturing in its conscience and personal responsibility. Thus, silence becomes a path of interiority and spiritual growth. In this way, the experience of divine silence is not only a negative or despairing experience, it can also become an invitation to reflection, to contemplation, and to a deeper understanding of the mystery of human existence. The Spirit is comfort and guide, moral inspiration, conscience, hope. The Holy Spirit is not only manifested as a transcendent presence or an unfathomable mystery, but also as an intimate reality that accompanies the inner life of the human being. Its action is not always perceptible in extraordinary ways. Often it is expressed in the most discreet aspects. Moral inspiration, the conscience that illuminates decisions, and the hope that sustains us in the midst of uncertainty. Conscience, in this sense, is not merely a psychological judgment of right and wrong, but a space where the voice of the Spirit can be welcomed. It is there that the human being perceives a silent call that guides their steps, even when the external world seems confusing or contradictory. This guidance does not negate freedom, but rather deepens it, inviting a more lucid and responsible choice. Moral inspiration often arises unexpectedly. It does not always respond to complex reasoning, but to an inner clarity that imposes itself with serenity. In those moments, the Spirit acts as a light that does not force, but illuminates. It does not compel, but guides. Human beings then discover that they are not alone in their decisions, but accompanied by a presence that sustains without invading. Hope, for its part, constitutes one of the deepest expressions of this spiritual action. It is not simply optimism about the future, but an inner certainty that remains even in the midst of suffering or darkness. This hope does not deny the difficulty, but rather transcends it, allowing the person to avoid succumbing to despair. Overall, the Spirit reveals itself as comfort and guidance, not in the sense of eliminating pain or questions, but in the sense of offering an inner direction that allows one to navigate them meaningfully. Where human beings experience silence, the Spirit does not always respond with words, but rather with a presence that sustains, accompanies, and transforms from within. The Spirit in everyday life, how it manifests in the simple lives of people. Many people expect to find God only in great events, extraordinary miracles, or exceptional experiences. However, the Holy Spirit often manifests itself in a much more humble and silent way. His presence frequently appears in everyday life, in small gestures, simple words, and seemingly insignificant moments. The Spirit doesn't need to make noise to act. It is often found in the calm of a sincere conversation, in the patience of a mother caring for her child, in the outstretched hand to someone who is suffering, or in the serenity of an elderly person contemplating the afternoon. Silence. Modern life, full of speed and distractions, makes it difficult to perceive this discreet presence. Human beings live surrounded by sounds, screens, and constant worries. However, the Spirit continues to speak in the depths of our consciousness, where a space for interiority still exists. Sometimes it manifests as an unexpected intuition that guides an important decision. Other times it appears as an inner peace difficult to explain rationally. It can also present itself as a serene strength to endure suffering, illness, or loneliness. There are simple people who, without extensive studies or theological discourses, transmit a profound spiritual light. In them, one discovers a quiet kindness, a capacity for listening, and a compassion that seem to come from a place higher than themselves. This simplicity can be one of the most authentic forms of the Holy Spirit's presence. The Spirit also manifests itself in forgiveness. Truly forgiving is not easy for the human heart. It requires overcoming pride, resentment, and the desire to retaliate. When a person manages to forgive sincerely, even in the midst of pain, an inner strength emerges that many Christian traditions have interpreted as the action of the Spirit. Contemplation of nature can also become a space for spiritual encounter. The sound of the sea, the wind through the trees, the gentle rain, or the silence of the night sometimes awaken a sense of mystery and depth. In those moments, human beings perceive that there is something beyond matter and the noise of daily life. The Holy Spirit does not usually impose itself. It respects human freedom and acts discreetly. That is why many people pass by its presence without recognizing it. Only those who learn to stop, to listen, and to look deeply can discover this invisible dimension of reality. Perhaps the real problem of contemporary humanity is not the absence of God, but the inability to perceive Him in the small things of each day. And perhaps the Spirit continues to walk silently among simple people, there where goodness, compassion, and hope still exist.